Hey, everybody. Happy Wine Wednesday. Hope you're having a fabulous Wednesday so far. We are rushing at the last minute to get this started. Whoops, turn that down. So sorry, guys. Was running a little late from work. But here we are. Here I am. Got the wine in hand. Running a little low, though. But it's my favorite. Drinking on some Spyglass tonight. If you feel like joining me, the link's in the description. Let me know how your Wednesday's going. And I'm actually personally a little bit under the weather this week. Last week was terrible. This week's not been much better. So this will probably be a quick one. But if you have any Seahorse topics or anything that you'd like to discuss, well, I'm here to listen to you and to share with you. And I did promise that last week, because we were not able to make it, that I would make sure to cover some of the questions that we've gotten in the inbox. So we will be certain to do that. But very quickly, let's see who's here. I don't think Ray joined today. We were running a little bit late. Hey Kim, this is called the I took out the braid and faked it. Look, I hope you enjoy it. How are you? Living Garbage got snow. Ugh. I'm sorry, I'm not a snow chick myself. No snow. We actually have snow here and ice. In fact, this morning I wasn't smart enough to realize that I would have to defrost my windshield, so I was late for everything. The whole day's been rushed. Hope the snow is great in your area. Hope you're having snowball fights and snowmen. Actually, I'm curious, for those of you that keep seahorses, what do you do about your aquarium temperatures when there's snow, when the weather gets frosty and cold outside? What do you do to keep your temperatures up? Do you use heaters? Do you just keep your house a certain temp? Tell me what you do and I'll share what I do. Hey, Salty, what's up? And Kim has 36 seahorse babies currently. How freaking cool. How are you doing with them? Is this your first round with, Fry? What's it been like so far for you? Share your experience and let me know if you have any wisdom to share or any questions. If you want to jump in, you don't have to, but if you want to jump in on the link, come show us your seahorse babies. Would love to see. But either way, congrats, and would love to know how you're doing with them. Okay, we are going to jump to questions, but just wanted to see how everybody was doing. Oh yeah, okay, we got to do the wine for a minute. All right. So much better. Okay. Anyhow, let's see. If I missed any questions or anything, guys, keep shouting them out. I'll eventually see them. And let's see. Living Garbage said, your house is always set at 68. Climate is normally stable. I actually do the same thing. I see so many incidents that occur with heaters, whether it be malfunctioning or whether it be, people not covering them properly and the seahorse is getting burned. I'm not saying that having heaters in a seahorse tank is bad, because if that works for you, cool. I just never personally have. I don't like to be cold myself, so when it's cold outside, my house is warm, So I just never have had to really worry about it. Seahorses you're better off having cooler temperatures in a seahorse tank than warmer temperatures. So frankly, they probably like it when the air cools down a bit. I'm not sure. I'm not scientific enough to know how carbon dioxide and all that weird stuff changes when it gets cooler based on the outside air, but I just know that I'm with you. I've personally just kept the home a certain temperature and the seahorse tank stays stable. So, and as we've discussed many times before, fluctuation is way more important than, a specific temperature. We shoot for certain numbers, but chasing numbers is never as good as just keeping it stable. So A plus on that. All right, Kim also said, let's see, 9 or 3 weeks old of your seahorse fry. That's awesome. Please tell me more, because for those of us that aren't professional breeders, hats off to the professional breeders by far, but for those of us who just breed for the love of it and because it's so amazing, and seahorses are so amazing, when you get just a few to do well and survive to adulthood, it's huge. I mean, it's really huge. We need a button. Okay, it's really huge. But I have a couple of seahorses with me still today. Little Cheryl, for instance, is my like mascot. I've always wanted her to make her the channel mascot. She's still alive today. My very first seahorse that ever was raised to adulthood, and it was really awesome. And I see something's going on, guys. Got to see what it is. Oh my gosh, I've got it too small. Oh no. Okay, well, if someone just subscribed or donated, thank you. You're awesome. I'll make sure to comment my undying appreciation. For some reason, I can't see what it says. Anyhow, oh no, a Salty Reef. Happy Wine Wednesday, Salty. Mwah. Want to hear how you're doing. I know you're hardworking daddy-o and making the beautiful big tanks, but I want to hear how your channel's doing. Anyhow, I'm bouncing around, guys. Sorry. Kim said, sorry, 4 weeks old. I think that's amazing, Kim. And as I was rambling on about, little Cheryl was my first seahorse that I got to survive to adulthood. And I didn't do everything properly. I didn't do everything perfectly. In fact, I had my fry in a macro tank, which, most people don't even attempt at this point. You want a more sterile situation for fry. But she was strong enough and she survived, and it makes me so proud. So the fact that you have so many doing so well, and of course I did get better as I went along, guys, but that first one will always have my heart. So I'm so proud of you, Kim. Amazing job. And let me know how it's going, what you're doing to keep them, thriving. I'd love to hear all of it. And you're doing water changes daily, formalin, and BBS. Well, I can tell you now that you're 10 times ahead of where I was when I started. Because that's awesome. When I first started trying to breed and keep the fry alive, Dan wasn't, exactly my full-time mentor yet, and he hadn't taught me all the things that I know now. And so you're way ahead of the game, and thank goodness for all of these secrets shared in our groups and in One Wednesday and etc., because now you guys know all of these tricks that really do work. I wasn't using formalin when I first started. I do now, of course, when I have fry, but hats off. I'll quit rambling, but hats off. Seriously, great job. Would love to see some pictures. Post them on the page, whatever you want to do. And your babes were not planned. I was going to say welcome. Of course, they're always welcome. They were not planned. They usually aren't. Cheryl Taylor is one of the best breeders, keepers, etc. I've ever known. She's excellent on advice and just everything to do with seahorses. She's the one that's raising the tiger tails and a couple other species right now. But anyways, she's just excellent with seahorses. And one of her main things is if you're gonna get a pair of seahorses, you might want to start getting the fry tank ready because they breed like rabbits for sure. So anyhow, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. And if anybody does pop in, I did start late tonight, but if Dan or Ray jump in, of course they can share their expertise. They have a lot more experience than I do with breeding, but I can tell you anything I did, but chances are you're ahead of me in the game because, like I said, I wasn't even using formalin. All right. Anyways, let's see. Anybody else got anything going on? How are things going for you? I'm not going to sit here and complain about my pathetic weeks, but let me know what's going on with you, what you're drinking tonight, all that good stuff. And I did want to, okay. See, every time I get ready to go to questions, you ask a question. Love you, Kim. You're awesome. What age can they go to the display tank? Honestly, my answer would be that depends on what you want to do with them. If you're trying to just incorporate them into your aquariums and keep them, that's one thing. If you're trying to sell them to locals or anything like that, I'll just tell you what I did personally. The seahorses that I raised that I wanted to keep, like little Cheryl, and the few others after that, I kept them in their own tank until they were probably, I personally kept them in their own tank until they were a lot older. Not for any particular reason. I don't think that there's, any age where it's like, oh, they're good enough to go in the display tank. It was just that, I wanted them to be old enough, strong enough, and I'm extra super careful, unlike some others. I think that most professional breeders, try to keep them separate for different reasons, like keeping, generations separate, keeping males and females, and etc. But as far as like their strength and when they can go into the display tank, I really would personally say once they're completely weaned onto frozen foods, I personally would feel comfortable putting them into a display tank. I mean, if they're of the age where they're old enough, long enough, or tall enough, however you want to say it, to sell and also eating frozen foods, I don't see any problem with moving them over. So I would say that the weaning process is a huge part of it. And of course, we can see what other people say. Give your comments, give your opinions. When I did decide to try to sell some of the fry that I raised, then I just kept them separate for the main reason that, they were for a specific purpose, and I just had a big display tank set up for them. But I did mix in future batches, if that makes sense. So I guess my answer is once they're weaned and at the point where you would be able to sell them, I don't see any problem putting them in a display tank. Maybe do it slowly, maybe see how things go with a few kind of thing, but I wouldn't worry too much. All right, let's see. Seahorses are very sociable animals, like to live in groups. I have one reed-eye and two erectus. Do I need to add one more reed-eye? I have seen one erectus swirling around the reed-eye. Okay, MS. Um, Based on what you've described just initially, of course, there's lots of questions that go into this, but when you see one seahorse swirling around another, I'm going to guess that the seahorse doing the swirling is a male. Maybe let me know if I'm correct. Um, Seahorse males, I had a question the other week whether if I was going to do just one sex of seahorse in a display tank, which sex I would do. And there's a lot of debate on this topic. It's really preference. But I personally would go with all females because the males just seem to be more, not aggressive, but flirty, maybe is the word. The males like to flirt with the females and the males. And they will, to the point of harassment, flirt. And so I'm curious to know if your twirly male, the one that keeps bugging the reed eye, is a male. If your twirly erectus is a male. If that be the case, he probably just has a crush on the reed eye. I would not, I would like to know how big the tank is, first of all, because adding another seahorse to me, more importantly than their social status or their need for interaction with their own species or any of that good stuff, what's more important to me is that they do not get, oh my gosh, I'm stumbling on my words, guys, that there aren't too many in a tank. Because the biggest thing is keeping the the organics low, the bio load controllable. And so how big is the aquarium? And that would be my first question in whether or not to add another seahorse. I don't see a tremendous problem with it as long as the tank's big enough, but I wouldn't particularly say it's a necessity. If they're flirting, erectus and reed eye are the two species that do create hybrids. Whether you're okay with that or not is up to you, but in the wild and in captivity, we've noted that erectus and reed eye will interbreed. So they may very well just be flirting. Unless you feel it's a problem, give me some more info before I keep rambling on and on. Hi, Christopher Carey. And now we have a pro in the house to give us some expert opinions. Thanks for joining, Chris. The link's there if you want to join. Don't feel obligated, though. I'm probably going to make this a quick one. You can see the bags under the eyes. It's been a rough week. Rough couple weeks, anyways. All right, but anyways, we're talking about whether or not to add a second reed eye in a tank with two erectus and one reed eye, in which one of the erectus is doing some what looks like possibly harassment of the reed eye. And I asked if the erectus was a male because we know the boys will be boys. But let's see. Then MS asked, I see your question, Kim. Just 1 second. How often should I use Celcon to mix with mysis shrimp? I've been doing it in small quantities every day. Celcon, I can't give you a definitive answer on that because I don't use it. The only type of, I don't use enrichment on the outsides of foods because so many times it's been proven that when you add it to the tank, it gets off the food really quickly and into the water and creates more organics. I'm not saying what you're doing is wrong. If it's working for you, keep doing it. Um, I would just say with the Celcon, if you've been doing it in small quantities every day, I mean, if again, if your parameters are staying in check, if your nitrates aren't getting high, if your phosphates aren't getting high, if you're not noticing algae growth, then you're not, then it's not causing any problem and might very well be helping. I don't think there's been any like serious studies on the extent of help provided by Celcon. Um, so I would say what you're doing is correct. Guys, pitch in your thoughts, please. Sometimes if I don't use a product, I have a hard time answering the question. Um, but what do you guys think of Celcon? How do you use it? Even if you don't hear the question during the stream while we're live, if you answer later, the question will be seen by anyone who's in here. So, Chris, what do you think of Celcon and using it? Because I don't. So, should I be adding Dan's probiotics to the nursery? I think no, because 100% water changes. Actually, oh gosh, I wish Dan, if you're watching, Dan, we need you in here. Um, I use probiotics in the nursery. I always have. I didn't do 100% water changes though, so that's a very good question. You guys are stumping me up here. I think that the probiotics, if I'm not mistaken, I hate to be wrong. I'll correct myself if I'm wrong, guys, but I'm pretty sure that with the probiotics, there's only um, the oh gosh, the lifespan. It's not the lifespan. Chris, help me out here. Lord, help me. The length of time before they are working. I'm messing this all up. I think you're okay. Let's leave it there. I think you are fine using the probiotics. I don't think it's a waste. I use probiotics in every single fry tank. I didn't do the 100% water changes, but you're still getting the benefit of the probiotics, even if you're doing 100% water changes, if that makes sense. Um, Maybe not as much as if you weren't, but that's my 2 cents. And guys, don't forget, if I don't have a full answer for you like with Celcon, I'll get it. And you will have it by next week. If not in the comments, then we'll talk about it next week. And Chris doesn't use Celcon, but and yeah, Chris is such an awesome caregiver. He doesn't use any enrichment, right? But anyhow, um, yeah. But yeah, Kim, I always use probiotics, and we can get Dan to give us some detailed explanation on that. You know, I just know it works. You know what I'm saying? Like I can't give you the exact details and how long they work and what exactly they do. I just know they work. So we'll get some further information on that one. Um, MS, you want to try for any other questions? I might be able to answer. I'm really failing here tonight. Well, it's Wine Wednesday. I'm just glad you guys are here. All right. And I did want to get to a couple of the questions that were sent in the comment section of Seahorse Whisperer Society. And one, we kind of touched on this last week, or the week, no, I'm sorry, the week before. But I was wondering, for those of you that do keep seahorses in the comments, do you, the question is, are zoas okay in a seahorse tank? And this is a very controversial topic, because for a very long time people thought that zoas were fine in the seahorse tank. Then the whole confusion about what's the difference between a zoa and a pally came about, and versus the big ones that have a lot of problems versus the little ones that maybe don't. And a lot of people have not had trouble keeping them. A lot of people have. So unfortunately, this was another case of I never have tried. The only thing I've ever kept in a seahorse tank as far as coral go are not even, well, they're Gorgonian. I keep Gorgonian. I've sometimes kept leathers, but that's about it. I just keep my reef tanks and my seahorse tanks separate. So I was hoping that somebody in the comments would give their opinion and what's worked for you. because I've seen a lot of very, very beautiful tanks with psoas in them. I just can't answer because I don't. So let me know what's happening with you guys on that count. And oh, Kim, I'm just now seeing the comments, guys. Kim said she enriches brine shrimp or baby brine shrimp, but probiotic is separate. Do you mean? Okay, wait. I'm trying to follow the comments here. Do you mean that you enrich the BBS with probiotics, or do you mean that you enrich them with something else like Celcon and then use the probiotics in the actual aquarium? Is that what you're saying? I personally used Dan's probiotic formula in both cases. I'd use it as as a feed, and then actually I'm saying it wrong. Dan has a feed that has probiotics in it. I used that as the feed for the BBS, and then I used the actual Mike F for the aquarium. So let me know what you're doing and how it's working for you. But I think that any, most enrichments that you actually feed to the tank via foods, meaning by feeding it to the Artemia and then feeding it to the seahorses, are going to be excellent and very helpful. My only qualm about answering the first question about Celcon directly on the food that's thrown into the tank is that there's so many opinions that it comes off almost immediately and doesn't get to the gut of the seahorse. A lot of people think it does. So again, I just want to get more information before I give my official opinion, All right. And Salty Reef said there wouldn't be a negative side effect, but like Kelly was saying, I think the potency and effectiveness, I can't even talk tonight, guys. Effectiveness would be diluted by the 100% water changes. Oh, to the probiotics in the fry tank. I still think that they would have a good effect though. Actually, Kim, I'm curious. You said you're doing 100% water changes on the fry tank. So does that mean you're like in my one of my articles that's not currently up, but in one of my articles I talked about doing a fry tank, and I talked about one way to do it effectively is to take two separate tanks and literally swap them, basically. And what you're talking about doing 100% water change is very similar to that method. Is that kind of what you're doing? I'm just curious, if how well that's working for you, because I'd like to hear more about what's working for you. And I see Cheryl kind of jumped in. Reed-eye need pods as their first food. Absolutely. Cheryl, actually, if you're still watching, the question that she was asking is, she has two erectus adults and one reed-eye in her aquarium. And one of the erectus is now doing a twirling gesture with the reed-eye. And her question was, should I add another reed-eye? She was worried that maybe there was a problem with the fact that the erectus was twirling the reed-eye. And I was just talking about the fact that if the erectus is a male, he's probably flirting. And I talked a little bit about how erectus and reed-eye are the two species that are very known for, intermingling, I don't know else, but hybridization, love beyond species kind of thing, not taking any kind of weird stuff with that, but you know what I'm saying. Anyhow, so any additional thoughts about whether or not three's too many or a crowd or not enough? Please give your absolute opinions for sure. And okay, so a little more information. Kim says you're enriching BBS with Dan's feed. Just wonder about the benefits from probiotics in the tank. Okay. Well, I personally am going to from the very start say that I think absolutely you're still getting a benefit, but I will absolutely get back to you. I'm about right here going to watch this, you guys, live. Should we call Dan live? No, no, he'd kill me. Okay, but I'm going to message him and say, Sir Dan, we need you if you're available. If you are available, we have probiotic questions. And again, Kim, if not, this is the first thing we'll talk about next week. Promise. And okay, I did want to make sure again, guys, that we hit the questions. Yeah, and sterile tank daily, that's one of the methods that I'll tell you. I'll tell a quick story about how I started out. I started to ramble about it. Now I'm going to go ahead and tell you anyways. All right. So when I first started out, I, like you, had surprise fry. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I wanted so badly to be successful with them, but I had no idea what I was doing. And so I put up a separate aquarium and separated them and I actually got them to the eating phase, quite a few of them, in a tank with that I set up just like a regular tank. I had sand in it. I had macros in it. I didn't have a lot of survivors that first time around. Now, on my behalf, most of the time they say that the first batch from any set of seahorses is likely not going to be fantastic. And that's what makes your success so great. Because the first batch, I always say this when people are like, oh, my seahorses had fry, I tried so hard and I failed. And I'm like, try again. Because the first batch, the seahorse male is young, the father, the seahorse mother is young. They are just figuring things out, right along with you figuring things out. And so the eggs might not be perfect. The male's incubation of the eggs might not be perfect. He might release them too soon. You know, they got to figure it out too. And so the first batch, I'm not saying don't try by all means, but the first batch is usually really difficult to keep them alive. So I'm so proud of you for keeping so many alive, and I'm still proud of myself for keeping one alive. My first batch had one survivor, little Cheryl, who's still alive. So that just shows how strong she was. But anyways, as I learned, you know, I started doing exactly what you're talking about now. Basically a sterile tank. I don't think I was doing it every day. I think I was doing it every like 2 to 3 days, but that was my method. And I had a lot more success with the second batch. Then I went on to do some other things that, you know, I got completely ridiculous and set up tubs, and you don't even want to know. Well, if you want to know, I'll be happy to share sometime, but I would be happy to, I would be really happy to see you succeed. Um, you know, because I realize that your thing is more like a love of seahorses. So definitely let us follow along with you. All right. And you can drive to Dan's house. Kim, get over there. Tell him he's missing Wine Wednesday. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Um, but it's a great question, and I'd be happy. You know, I want to make sure that anybody who watches this knows too. So we'll definitely share it. Okay, and MS came back with some more information. My seahorse tank is bare bottom, but I eventually want sand substrate. I keep telling myself that seahorses are nasty eaters and leftover her food is hard to clean off the sand bed, hence causing a lot of sand bed, or I'm sorry, causing a lot of algae and cyano problems. How do you train seahorses to eat out of the feeding tray? Okay, so I would absolutely agree with you, and I think you're extremely smart to start off with bare bottom. That's I just think that's really smart. With seahorses, I always advise that because when you start off with bare bottom, you get to learn really quickly how much they eat and what happens to that food and how, you know, slowly and then sometimes fast, and you get to learn the seahorses, you know, first and foremost. So A plus. I did eventually, you know, I have many seahorse tanks that have sand or macroalgae all over them. And the way that you would train, the way that I trained my seahorses to eat in certain areas, I don't personally use feeding trays because I'm lazy. That's really the reason. I don't want to clean them. And the most problems that people have when they use a tray or a feeding dish is that they don't clean it properly or enough, and it grows bacteria and causes a problem. So as long as you clean it, there's no problem with them. I just don't use them because I'm lazy and I don't like to clean. So anyways, to train a seahorse, I guess the best method that I used to train seahorses is to put the dish there. If you're familiar with your seahorses and they're not afraid of you, you know, I remember a couple that were stubborn. You know, I remember literally using using something to kind of push them over to the dish to show them there was food there. Once they realize the food's there, you know, then they figure it out. And if your seahorses are on a schedule where they already know when they're going to eat, then all you have to do is when they realize it's feed time and the dish is right there, if you put the food in the dish, they're going to eventually figure it out. I did do a video. I'll try to find it and link it in the description. The video concentrated more on feeding the seahorses if you have some that don't, you know, eat as quickly. Ooh, somebody jumped in. Who is it? Hello? Oh, it's Dan. Oh, good. We have probiotics questions, Dan. Hello, Dan.
Am I here?
You are here. Are you? You sound so tired. Now I feel guilty.
It's all right.
Are you okay?
Yep.
All right. Well, you know what? I'll finish rambling in just a minute about training seahorses to a feeding dish. First, we want to get Dan's questions out of the way so that we don't have to bug him. Now I feel extremely guilty. Um,
No, go ahead. You can finish what you're saying.
Oh, I was just rambling, but we'll jump back to it. But honestly, I'm dying to know the answer to one of the questions. The question asked was, the person is, let's see, I don't want to say it incorrectly. The question was, if you're handling a fry seahorse tank in which the method you're using is to sterilize or like basically completely clean the tank every 24 hours, so switch tank swapping, which is a workable method for a small time person just breeding for fun. um, the question was, do probiotics still hold any benefit to an aquarium that gets 24? Go ahead.
The answer is yes. And the tank swapping is also done sometimes commercially.
Okay, see, go ahead.
Um, it's not necessarily a bad idea. There are some who subscribe to that method. I mean, it takes extra tankage to be able to do it, but the tank swapping itself keeps everything clean, but it doesn't necessarily eliminate all bacteria.
Mm.
Inadvertently, if there's bacteria in the system, when you move them, although the numbers are going to be lower when you move them, there's cross contamination.
Oh.
So, and probiotics work not only externally, but they also work internally in terms of colonizing the gut. And most bacterial infections with the fry are going to be in the gastrointestinal tract.
Gotcha. So, um, so which method is most, if you had to choose and do only one method, would you suggest that a person use the probiotics in the feed or in the tank?
If I was only going to do one method, it'd be in the feed.
Okay. But doing it in the tank does hold quite a bit of benefit also.
It does.
Okay.
We did both, but if I was only going to do one, I think it's more critical for the gut than it is for the tank.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, if that did not answer your question, Kim, please pipe up because it answered mine. I knew there was a reason. I just didn't know cross contamination. Okay. And then also we had a question about using Celcon on the food, and I kind of rambled around about how I don't personally use it because of the fact that there's no proof that it doesn't immediately come off the food, and I'm not quite sure that it actually gets to the seahorse gut. But can you, while I find the actual question, can you give your thoughts on Celcon? And oh, the question was how often to mix it with mysis shrimp. So she's actually mixing it in the feed, and I'm guessing frozen. Go ahead.
So we're doing this as a top dressing, not using it as enrichment, correct?
Correct.
Okay. The first thing to understand is that enrichments for artemia are designed to be enriching the artemia, in which the organism partially digests the stuff and it changes the profile of the artemia for the target organism, i.e., the seahorse.
Mm.
When you take an enrichment and top dress it on a food, there's a couple of problems with it. The first, of course, is that much of it washes off and doesn't hit the target organism, number one. Number two is that it contributes to the organic loading of the system. The higher the organics, the higher the microbial population. And then the third is that it's really not designed to correct the nutritional profile of the mysis. What the enrichment is supposed to do is correct the nutritional profile of the artemia
Mm.
so that it more closely resembles the mysis.
Right, the
So,
DHA stuff, right? Go,
right.
sorry.
So, conceivably, if you gave too much enrichment, you could be going the reverse, screwing up the diet by putting too much of one certain thing in.
Gotcha. And for anybody who didn't get all that, because I know if I hadn't heard this before, I wouldn't get it. Basically, It's that if you read up on brine shrimp, many people say that Artemia or brine shrimp are not nutritious for seahorses. We've talked about this extensively on this channel, that they are actually nutritious. They just don't have the DHA, so they can't be the forever for always food. However, when you feed the Artemia or brine shrimp that DHA or enrichment, then they become more better at becoming a good food for seahorses. Did I say that really badly? I'm sure I did, but go ahead.
Not badly. The Artemia is naturally high in protein,
Yeah.
but on the fatty acid profile, it's high in EPA, but it's very low in DHA. And the problem is that seahorses cannot upconvert EPA to DHA like we as humans can.
Uh,
So they need to have that in their diet. And when you're enriching Artemia, it has to be a high DHA product because Artemia rapidly catabolizes the DHA back down to EPA. That's
right.
why I don't use things like algae and stuff to enrich the Artemia. I go for a product that's very high in the DHA component. So if I was using a Celco, I would go to a Super Celco, but I prefer the Algae Max series because it has such a high DHA to EPA ratio.
Sure. And so, anybody who liked my explanation better, that it just makes a better food, I need some thumbs up. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Thank goodness for Dan. Thank you, Dan. And finally, just so we don't seem to be knocking anything, would you say that as long as someone is monitoring their aquarium and if not seeing the organics, I know you can't test for organics, but if you're not seeing nitrates, phosphates, etc., if you happen to be testing for them and you don't see algae growing and stuff like that, and you're using the Celco, um, is it necessary? I mean, is it better than nothing, or would you say just don't?
You talk about putting Celco on the mysis.
Yeah.
I just don't see a need for it.
Okay.
The mysis has already got close to the right nutritional profile, and most of it's going to come off in the water. And just because you don't have high nitrates or phosphates or algae growing doesn't mean you
I
don't
know.
have a high nutrient level.
You're right.
So, um, and a high nutrient level in of itself doesn't necessarily equate to something bad, but it increases the microbial population. And if that flora should shift from a positive to a negative, you suddenly have a problem in the tank. And it
Right.
usually happens before people catch it. And it's usually you're playing catch up, which is very difficult to do when when the system starts when you start having sick seahorses.
And what he just described, guys, is how we end up with issues, even though our tank we didn't add anything new and everything's the same seahorses as forever, no new anything, and all of a sudden you have a problem. It's usually what he's talking about, that shift in flora. Okay, now really quick, what if someone were using the Celco on Artemia, frozen Artemia? Would that make any difference in your mind?
No.
Okay, same reasons. I got you. I just thought I'd ask. Um,
Well, the frozen Artemia aren't, I mean, the frozen Artemia probably aren't going to have the correct nutritional profile. They're okay as an occasional treat or food, but it's not something I would use as a primary diet. Most of the frozen Artemia on the market is enriched with spirulina, which does not have a high DHA to EPA ratio.
well, no, right, and I understood completely. The only reason I wondered is I'm like literally thinking as a non-scientific person. And if does Celco not contain the DHA stuff?
No, it contains DHA. It's just not as high as some of the other products that we use.
Okay, well, I was just literally thinking if even a little bit got in, but I'm sure you're right. I don't
The
doubt
other
you.
the other thing I would point out, anybody that's using Celco, is that once the container is opened, it should be used within 30 days or it should be tossed because it's a fat. Think of it as fish. I like to use the example of shrimp. If you bought fresh shrimp and put it in the fridge and just let it sit there for a month, would you eat it? And the reason most people say no is because it's going to go bad. And the reason it goes bad is because the fats become rancid, and that happens with Selco as well.
Is that
That's
true?
an
I'm sorry, go ahead.
that's another reason why I like the powdered enrichments
Mm.
moreover than the oil enrichments.
I was just going to ask if the same was true for others, but you answered. So great, thank you. um, Hi, Mermaid's Reef. Let me see any other questions that I've missed. I did see what age to try frozen foods. Can I give this one a stab real quick? I personally was starting to try to wean fry onto frozen foods at like 3.5 to 4 weeks. Because when I first began, as we talked about, I didn't know what I was doing. I was waiting until I felt like they were ready and they were not getting the nutrition they needed. So 3 to 4 weeks they actually can start to eat it. You would be amazed how much they can take down. You think there's no way they'll eat that, and then they do, but you do need to mush it. Now I'll let Dan give you a sciencey answer. Go ahead, Dan. What age to wean fry?
Well, it depends upon their growth rate. If they're growing fast, and you, we don't push the frozen food until about 6 weeks. We'll start introducing it in very small amounts, somewhere between 4 and 5 weeks. And if they're a smaller batch, sometimes we'll wait till the fifth or sixth week. But you want to do a transition, even if they're taking the frozen food. You want to continue with the other food for a couple of weeks and taper it down, not just cut it off.
Gotcha. No, yeah, absolutely. And if you want to talk about that in depth, I can certainly tell you how difficult it was for me. It's not for everybody. And Lucy has a bunch of great tricks on weaning fry too. Really, really great tricks. But I like what Dan said about the fact that don't cut off their food because I tried that once. It doesn't end well. Um, okay. And what's the name of the powdered enrichment you recommend to use?
Well, obviously, what I'm using is Dan's feed. I happen to know the guy who designed it, but um, I would tell you that there's a high likelihood that Alyssa's is probably very, very, very similar to mine.
I didn't even. I feel terrible. I didn't even know she had one. Good. Hats off to Seahorse Savvy for sure. Um, and obviously, if you want to try Seahorse Alyssa's, seahorsesavvy.com. And Dan, are they still able to talk to you about Dan's feed via messenger or
Yes,
okay? So hit Dan up on Facebook Messenger or through the group. Just don't talk about sales on the group. But your
don't
kid.
talk about live animal sales on the
Oh,
group.
you can talk about the dry.
Yes, you just can't talk
Oh,
about live animals.
well, there we
Or
go.
not talk about. You can't sell. Talk about sales with live animals.
Okay. Well, I'll have to do a post asking about that. Okay. Guys, if I missed any other questions, I feel like I did. Dan, just to get your 2 cents because nobody else really commented on it. How do you feel about Zoas in a seahorse tank? I know you don't keep them, but have your customers or friends had any luck, not luck, etc.?
Some have. There's some that swear by it, and of course, there's others that offer a different opinion. But um, I'm pretty much neutral on it.
Okay. Just the main thing with tank mates that are coral would be just to make sure they can't sting, make sure that if the seahorse is going to hitch on them, it won't kill them or whatnot, and anything else you can think of off the top of your head. The reason that polys and zoas are kind of a thing is because of all the new information about them releasing toxins and stuff when they're pissed. So, but would that affect a seahorse, you think?
It could is probably. I'm not as concerned about that as that. Sometimes some of these little animals, people don't think they can sting. In reality, they can.
Right.
And there's been more and more incidences of people as well as animals that have been stung by them when they didn't think they ever stung.
Mm. Speaking of which, not a sting, but an animal that we didn't know was such a problem. Ray, if you happen to watch this later, I hope you're all right tonight. Sorry we started late, and I want to know how your seahorse is doing because remember, Ray had a lot of issues with the astrina. I always say it incorrectly, but the little starfish, little white starfish you find all over his tank. One crawled up on a seahorse and left a big old nasty mark and made a mess. So I'm really curious and hope that the seahorse is doing well. Okay, and then how do you train seahorses to eat out of a feeding tray? That's what I was rambling about when you came. And I know I did a video about it, but it's been so long. Do you have some comments about that at all?
Well, everybody does it a little bit different. I don't think there's a single correct way to do it. The way we did it when we were experimenting was we would start with putting a feeding in the tray, and we would, throughout the course of several days, we would continuously do the same thing at one feeding, not feed like we normally did, just put it in the tray. Then we started upping that, and after a while, all it took was one to catch on, and then the others followed suit.
Absolutely.
Um, we could. It was pretty easy to do with broodstock, but it was useless for the fry systems. There were too many seahorses.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I mean that's mainly what I figured too. The trouble that I always had with feeding trays personally, I kept quite a few, but I always kept deep dishes, and my seahorses were apparently a little not smart because they'd get stuck in them because I literally use deeper dishes because I keep the flow in my seahorse tank so high. Eventually, I moved over to power heads that allowed a feed mode, but always been curious how people say that they don't adjust the flow when they're feeding in a feeding tray. Is it just the placement, maybe, or
It can be placement, but it can also be design of the bowl or dish or whatever. We experimented with all kinds of different feeding stations, and our best feeding station to date has still, and will remain that way, I think, is a cereal bowl.
really? Okay. See, I used I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about, but the little, I think they're Omega 1. They're little blue clips called, and they say Omega 1, and they hold the nori, the like Tang food, the green strips of nori. And I used one of those and literally suctioned it to the wall and clipped on a plastic container dish. And it was so cool. And they got it right away. I mean, instantly they were over there sticking their heads in. But then a few of them went down into the dish and literally couldn't figure out how to get out. It was off. I have pictures, I have videos. But, anyways, so don't go too deep, guys. Or be ready to help the little scared buggers. What were you going to say, Dan?
We went so far as to go down to the shell place and found some exotic shells that were
Mm,
really cool. And I took some plexiglass, and I cut it into strips and then heated it and bent it so that it was like a hanger. And we tried those, but still, the best was just the plain bowl because they get inside the damn thing. Um, they kick the stuff around, and we found that they were just as happy with the bowl as they were with anything else we could use.
sure. And I saw the comments about Lucy. I was just going to mention that. She does have a fantastic net method, but she did hook up with, I can't remember his name. Kim, can you? There's a gentleman who made her a feeding dish that worked really well. We even have a video on it on this channel. I feel terrible. I'm gonna have to go look again because I can't remember the exact name. But he made her a dish or a feeding tray that she was extremely happy with. So we'll hit her up afterwards. I don't think I should message or call anybody else. Poor Dan sounds half asleep. Whoops. All right. And we'll find it. Ray, no problems that you didn't make it. Just, next week or message me or something. I just want to make sure your seahorse is okay and you're okay and, you know. All right. Anyhow, did I miss any other questions, guys? Um, or anything? Dan, did you want to, anything going on with you wanted to share now that I dragged you in?
No, I'm still selling the mini erectus.
Oh, did you guys see Lisa Lou, right? Am I saying it wrong?
Yeah,
Yeah. No.
yeah.
Oh, they are yes. Her mini is adorable. So cute. But and she got along just fine with the bigger ones, right?
Yes, yes, they do fine with the bigger ones.
That's awesome. Yeah, check out what's her group's name, Dan?
Um, I don't know. Um,
I know I can't remember either now.
I I don't know. I'm spacing on it.
I'm failing tonight, guys. I'm so sorry. This stupid flu crap has just got me screwed. Maybe if I can find it, I'll tag it in the description. That would be great, right? But she
Yeah,
shows off the mini. Go
I,
ahead, Dan.
I'm sorry, I can't remember, but I know it. I'm having an Alzheimer's moment.
Well, we'll tag it in the description for sure.
There you go.
Yeah.
Christopher Carey got it right. Seahorse Solutions.
Thank you, Christopher Carey. And we want to know how you're doing too. See, I don't even see his comment yet. Well, mine's behind. But Chris, I can hit you up on the side. I didn't want this to go very long tonight, but we need to get you in here. Hear how you're doing. We're dying to know. So, anyways, okay, well, guys, if there's no other huge questions tonight, I'm going to wrap it up. I'm feeling all guilty for pulling Dan in. Thank you, MS, Kim, everyone, for all the questions. And any questions we didn't get to from the messages because we got on such a roll here, I will be sure to have my little list handy next week and we will cover them all eventually. So keep asking, keep coming. And all right, I'm gonna call it for the night. Dan, you want to say adios?
Good night.
Happy Wine Wednesday, everybody. Cheers.